Welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly. Our main topics today: Israel is headed towards early elections and the latest developments in Syria. I'm Ladar Gravelazi, and joining me in the studio to discuss are Director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman, founder of Torat Tzedek, or Torah of Justice, Rabbi Arik Ashelman, Meretz member of Knesset Mossi Raz, and Dr. Reuven Berko, an expert and commentator on Arab affairs. The 2019 election campaign season officially began this week with the dissolution of the 20th Knesset. Both coalition and opposition lawmakers have welcomed the decision, but this short election season has already seen its fair share of surprises. First and foremost, Jewish Home leader Naftali Bennett and his number two, Ayelet Shaked, held a press conference Saturday night to make a surprise announcement that they are leaving the party to form a new secular religious right-wing party called Hayamin HaChadash, or the New Right. Also this past week, IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz officially announced his entrance into the political arena with a new party, Chosen LeIsrael, or Israel's Resilience. He is said to be in talks to run on a joint ticket with Moshe Bogi Ya'alon, former IDF Chief of Staff and Likud Defense Minister. And also on the horizon is the looming indictment of Netanyahu. Currently, the Prime Minister and the Likud are both leading in the polls by a safe margin, but will Attorney General Avichai Mendelblit recommend charges against the PM before the election, affecting this lead? One thing is certain: there is never a dull moment in Israeli politics, and there are sure to be lots more political intrigues in store as the election campaign progresses.
אני בא לכאן מישיבת ראשי מפלגות הקואליציה. אנחנו הסכמנו פה אחד להגיש חוק לפיזור הכנסת וללכת לבחירות בתחילת אפריל.
So let's jump right in. Let's talk about the latest announcement, which is the formation of Bennett's new party, Bennett and Ayelet Shaked's new party. Let's start with you, Dr. Berko. What does this mean for the right, this new party?
This is a very hard question in this preliminary stage in politics, because this is some kind of a gambling from those two heroes of the Jewish house.
Jewish Home, yeah.
Jewish Home. Because I believe that they thought about crystallizing a political party that will shadow the real Likud, the real Yamin, by imitating the motives and separating from extreme poles in their own parties. So I believe this is the main lever for what they intended to do in the first place. As for the chances that will create and that the imitation will be the source, I suspect. I don't believe that they will manage to change an imitation to the real thing. Likud is a very crystallized party, the members are very loyal to the party, and I don't believe that anyone will tend to go there. They aim those who are secular, that can join them, and they want to separate the extremists. This is some kind of combination, a mixture that offers a new formula. I suspect whether they will manage to run this idea while racing the Likud in its crystallized ideas. This will be a very, very hard challenge for them to do.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Berko is saying it's sort of an imitation of the Likud.
The real thing.
Of the real thing. Let's hear from you. Do you think this is a mistake on the part of Bennett, or is it a step in the right direction on his path into what he sees himself, his vision to become a prime minister one day?
Probably the answer is both. I mean, I hardly see a possibility that this new form, this new party, will get more seats than the Jewish Home. But since probably his goal and his partner's goal, Ayelet Shaked, is actually to be part of the Likud, maybe to lead the Likud, this is one step forward, because from the Jewish Home, that is the far right, actually the most far right party right now in the Knesset, they cannot do that. They must go towards the center in order to be part of the Likud, and of course, if they want to lead the Likud in the future.
Okay. Now, this election so far, we're seeing a lot of the emergence of, let's say, many small, sort of fragmented parties. We're seeing Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked branch out. We're also seeing Gesher by Orly Levy Abeksis. We have Lieberman's party, and now we also have former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz forming his own party, and Moshe Ya'alon forming yet another party, which they may run together. That still remains to be seen. Dr. Sherman, how is this going to affect the upcoming election, sort of this fragmentation of political parties?
Well, I think what worries me more is the fragmentation on the right rather than the fragmentation on the left, because any party that doesn't get through the threshold, those votes are going to be lost. And I think it was in 1992 when the right lost the elections and the Rabin government came in who gave us Oslo. That was because of the right was fragmented and votes for the right were lost. I think in that election, actually more people voted for right-wing parties than for left-wing parties, but because some right-wing parties didn't get through the threshold, those votes were lost. I think there might be a danger of that happening. I'd be glad to see that happening on the left, if votes on the left were lost because of fragmentation. I think the new party, setting up a new party now is a little bit late in the day. I don't think it's going to be a party that will attract many votes from across the political divide. And by across the political divide, basically the great divide in Israeli politics is the Palestinian issue, between people who think it's a good idea to set up a mega Gaza overlooking Tel Aviv and people who don't. But I think that we may well see, if the survival instinct kicks in, that you may see parties joining up, because on the right you have Naftali Bennett, you have the Jewish Home, you have, I think, Eli Yishai's might run as well, you have Moshe Feiglin's party. So if these parties all run and don't get through the threshold, you could have a large number of votes for right-wing parties, particularly hardline right-wing parties, that are lost. And I think this might be one of the most significant factors in the coming elections. I don't think this new party is going to be a game changer. I think the only, and you have the issue with Netanyahu, which basically you have an attempt at a legalistic putsch where no one can remove him from office in the polls, so they're going to try and remove him because he had too much champagne and too many cigars, which I think doesn't fly with the voters. I think that the attitude in the electorate today is, even if all the accusations against Netanyahu are correct as they've been presented, the question is, so what? Who cares? I've been looking at what Alan Dershowitz has been saying on the Netanyahu issue, and he says there's not enough evidence to convict him. If they're going to try and remove give and take from the political process, then what's left of politics? So I think, in fact, this, what to me looks like a contrived legal initiative against Netanyahu, could probably work in his favor.
Well, we'll get back to the legal issues facing Netanyahu, but you mentioned sort of that your main concern is that what can end up happening is that the right, a lot of parties on the right won't pass the threshold. So, Rabbi Asherman, we'll turn to you. Do you think that this is an opportunity for the left? Do you think they have a chance to seize power?
Anything's possible. In the last elections, the center left actually grew in numbers, although they weren't able to form a government. I have to say, though, as a director of a human rights organization, I can't take a position on left or right or this party or that party. I do miss some of the old parties, like some of my favorites over the years were the Taxi Drivers Party and the Men's Rights Party and some of the parties of years past. But what I am concerned about, and what I'll judge any of these parties on, left or right, and we work on Israeli economic justice issues with parties that wouldn't have any agreement with us on Palestinian issues, on issues like public housing, as I do want to see what these different parties, what positions are they going to take about socioeconomic justice for Israelis. Are they going to change the situation in which we don't even do a fair screening of asylum seekers to see if they deserve a status or low? Are we going to do something about the war we're waging on our own Arab Israeli citizens? And are we going to continue to steal land from Palestinians? Those are the issues. Those are the issues that I would judge any party, whether you call them left or right or center.
Okay, now, Mr. Oz, let's hear from you. Coming from the political left, I'll pose the same question. I mean, do you think this is the year for the left to sort of take over?
It's too early to know. It's too early to know. Of course, I see all over the world in most of the places the right wing is on power.
That's because the left wing failed.
That's because we are in a situation that is very comfortable for the right wing.
Because the left wing failed.
We have migration all over the world, and it's very easy to deliver hate against asylum seekers. It is easy to deliver hate against Palestinians in the Israeli case, and so else. So we are in a difficult situation, but I think we do have chances because of this fragmentation in the right wing, because of the corruption of the prime minister, because of the failure of the security, from the security point of view of the government. So I do think that we have chance.
Okay. Now, Dr. Sherman, you mentioned, we'll get to you. Yeah, Dr. Sherman mentioned that the Netanyahu indictment, he's saying, who cares?
Well,
I'm going to pose to you.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, that quickly to conclusions about whether he was convicted or something like this.
But everyone is waiting on Mendelblit to
describing the
decision.
arena in the Israeli and comparing it to the world, I believe it's jumping very, very fast to conclusions. Israeli left and right are totally different from the social color of other places along the world, and migrants, etc., etc. It's nothing to compare. But what I can tell you from my impression, by my point of view, is that in general, what we call the left, which is the Zionist camp, and all the other so-called parties, left, Meretz, for example, are miniatures of an ideology that no more relevant in the Israeli audience. Nobody really take seriously the ideological arguments or the justice of so-called human rights stories. The people in Israel became graduate to understand the real threat surrounding us. And that's why you can see tending of the critical massa of the Israeli public towards the right. They understand it not by economical claims and arguments. It's not relevant despite the fact that there's a lot to correct in the Israeli situation from economical point of view. But security is the name of the game. And I would not describe the Israeli government as failure in security matters. The opposite is the right. What we see in the international arena, success. What we see from security point of view, success. Imagine that a state like Israel, surrounded by so many millions of people who kill each other and bomb their mosques and synagogues and churches and killing Christians all over the world, in this enclave, which we call the paradise of the Middle East, Israel, we managed to run an economy, a society, a political regime that who is handling, or the one who is holding the wheel of this ship is Netanyahu. He do it successfully. That's why they're trying to run a show of blaming him in political matters, in criminal matters, because they cannot change it by the polls in democratic way. Okay. So I would add something that is very important. Speaking about human rights, I believe that the critical mass of Israelis understand that, first of all, we should take care of the Israeli Jewish human rights in this area, while others are important, but less of the existing of the Jewish majority as a minority in the Middle East. This is something that should be emphasized.
All right, well, speaking of security, we have to move on to our next topic. So now the Middle East is still reeling from the surprise U.S. announcement that it will withdraw its troops from Syria, as a number of players, mainly Turkey and Russia, are already stepping in to try to come out on top and fill the U.S. vacuum. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force launched an attack on Syria this past week, targeting Hezbollah and Iranian targets in the country. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel would stand steadfast on its red lines regardless of the U.S. withdrawal. This past week also saw a surprise visit by U.S. President Donald Trump to neighboring Iraq, where he defended his decision to withdraw troops and also told reporters that the U.S. provides Israel billions in aid so that Israel can take care of itself.
איננו מוכנים להשלים עם ההתבססות הצבאית האיראנית בסוריה שמכוונת נגדנו. אנו פועלים נגדה בתקיפות וברציפות, כולל בימים אלה. אמרתי שלא נירתע לעשות ככל שנידרש. ובכן, אנחנו נדרשים ואנחנו עושים. החלטת הנשיא טראמפ להוציא את החיילים האמריקנים מסוריה לא משנה את מדיניותנו. אנו עומדים איתן על הקווים האדומים שלנו, בסוריה ובכל מקום אחר.
So let's address first what U.S. President Donald Trump said this week, that, the U.S. gives Israel something like $4.5 billion in aid, and so Israel can take care of itself. Is this a signal of a changing shift in U.S. foreign policy? Is the U.S. abandoning Israel, so to speak? Dr. Sherman, let's start with you.
Well, I don't think that we can say that the Trump administration is abandoning Israel. I mean, I might not agree with the decision to pull out the American troops from Syria, but I certainly can understand it. America is still licking its wounds from two gory ground wars in Asia, and I can't see them being very keen on being embroiled in a third. I think that the Trump administration's sentiments, including some of the people in his closer circle, have a very warm sentiment towards Israel. I can't see him abandoning Israel completely, although there are many ways of providing assistance. I don't know what they're going to do with their naval forces there. I don't know what they're going to do with their air forces there, which could still be a determining factor. I think it's very early to try and predict the outcome of what's happening there. I think the most intriguing and the most important factors are the domestic situations in Iran and Turkey, because both the economies are more or less in free fall, particularly in Iran. And I think that's probably going to be the greatest factor determining the Iranian resolve to continue with its overseas adventurism. Turkey as well is not in a great situation. Of course, the people who might pay the greatest price are the Kurds. I think the West has been quite imprudent in their treatment of the Kurds, because I think the Kurds could certainly have been a stable ally in this rather unpredictable and usually hostile environment.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Burka, what do you think about the U.S. President's remarks?
I believe that there's nothing new in the policy of Trump towards us, because we never asked for a direct American involvement in our military matters. We didn't expect them to get involved in any fight we have here in the area. This support actually embodies, I believe, the fact that we are the barrage against Islamic invasion towards Europe and America. And they pay good money for their own reasons. It's not a favor that they do to us. They all know that we do it for their own sake. This is one. So, but I would emphasize something more important. I believe that this isolation, or this policy of being far away and to drive the car from beyond, is something that America does not really mean it, because we see that they have not neglected the Arab Peninsula, because this is something that they really do put their weight on. And what we do here by standing against the invasion of Iran and the fact that they try to draw a line from Tehran through Baghdad, Damascus, and Beirut, this is something that actually threat the Arab states from the north as well. They treat Hormuz and the southern Saudi Arabia and the Gulf state from the south. And even today, the deputy of the Revolutionary Guard had threatened America indirectly and the Arab states today. He said, we have the ability to stop the entrance of any hostile state in the region, on the ground, on the sea, or in the air. They meant Hormuz, they meant all this. So Israel is actually, by Israeli security standpoint, we are stabilizing the area by stopping the ambitions of Iran from the north and supporting Arab states from the south.
Okay, so-
And this is a good opportunity for us as Israelis to crystallize good relationship with Arab states, because we have actually a common ground and a common denominator to cooperate towards even solving the Palestinian problem.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the Israeli airstrike that we saw this past week. Reports in the media have said that Syria is now threatening to retaliate in the event of another Israeli strike. Is Israel's window of opportunity to operate in the country coming to an end?
You know, I'm not an expert for that, but I guess the answer is yes. We see what happens in Syria. In the last 7 years, Syria was not really existing. And now Syria starts to behave again as a state. And yes, it is the sad point from our point of view that they might do something in the future that they did not respond in the past, because they had, Assad has his own problems with the opposition and with all the rebels. So I cannot, I say very clear, nobody here, at least not me, I don't know exactly what happens in Syria, and basically I do trust the Israeli government, but I do remember that there are so many risks, and it's very problematic, and I hope that people in the government, in the army, understand that the situation in 2019 is going to be way different than 2012.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Asherman, your thoughts on this?
Well, listen, I think that we have certainly a right to defend ourselves. When I think I'm generally opposed to military action, except as a last resort, but the Jewish tradition is not a pacifist tradition. You have to look at a couple criteria. One, will it be effective? Secondly, I would support a military action that defends people from being slaughtered or defends ourselves. I was actually critical of President Obama for not creating a no-fly zone in Syria when it might have been helpful. Mm-hmm. The Talmud teaches us, in the same passage in Sanhedrin, where we're taught that if someone comes to kill you, you get up earlier to kill them first. But we're taught, if you use anything more than minimum necessary force, if simply to defend yourself or others, you kill somebody when you could have stopped them otherwise, you're a murderer. And then it goes even further to a standard that is so difficult, and I know that people here will say, is this even humanly possible? We're taught that even to defend your own life, you can't take the life of an innocent person.
It's good to have a rabbi, but it's better to have a much better chief of staff to the IDF.
Okay.
I believe.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today for ILTV's Israel Weekly. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Martin Sherman, Rabbi Arik Ashelman, Mossi Raz, and Dr. Reuven Belko. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News, on Twitter at ILTV News, and on our website at iltv.tv. I'm Ladar Gervais-Lazi. Thanks for watching.